Well, hello everybody. I'd like to introduce you to the studios at Electric City Television, where we continue our mission of public service. And tonight, we're going to give you actual and factual information regarding the Scranton-Abington Planning Association, which we also call SAPA. We have a distinguished panel with us, and I'm sure they will share the information with us and set the record straight on what this plan includes, what the benefits of it are, and what the features of it are. And I'd like the panel to actually introduce themselves. And we'd start over here with Mr. Paul Nardozzi, who I believe is from Dunmore. Is that correct?
That's correct. Thank you for having us here tonight. I'm Paul Nardozzi. I'm the Vice President of Dunmore Borough Council. I'm also a SAPA committee member.
Hi, I'm Cindy Campbell. I'm a community planner with the Department of Community and Economic Development Northeast Regional Office in Scranton.
And I'm Denise Prowell. I am the Secretary and Committee Coordinator for the Scranton-Abingtons Planning Association. I'm not representing any municipality. I'm just the Secretary.
I'm Mary Feli. I'm a resident of Dalton Borough, and I'm on the Dalton Borough Planning Commission and a member of the SAPA Committee.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And by the way, Denise, if it wasn't for just a secretary, the panel couldn't exist, so you're doing a fine job.
Thanks.
And I'd like to throw it back to Denise, who's going to give us a presentation and give us some information on SAPA and its potential for our region overall, correct?
Yes.
Go right ahead.
And I want to thank ECTV for inviting us here. And we're very glad for the opportunity to get the word out about the plan. ECTV also had broadcast our third public meeting in July of 2009 and ran that a lot, so that helped a lot of people get a lot of information, and we appreciated that too. So we've gathered a couple of members of our committee, and we might have one more coming in a little later. Of course, Don King, the Scranton City Planner, isn't here. We didn't want to put Don in a difficult position given City Council's vote on the plan, but of course, like the other committee members, he was very involved throughout these years in creating the plan, the part for Scranton, along with the help of the planning firm that SAPA hired, McCormick Taylor. I will give a little history of multi-municipal planning in a very, very short form. The Ridge administration had designated a 21st Century Environmental Commission. That was a commission made up of many people in the state, many experts in the state, which found that sprawling development into the countryside was the most serious environmental problem in the state. And also around the same time, and even before then, there were other studies being done about the economic cost of that type of development. And also there's journalistic things being done, especially by, I'm going to show this book. It's called Save Our Land, Save Our Towns by Thomas Hilton. And this was widely used and widely respected. Thomas Hilton won a Pulitzer Prize for this book, and it was used by a lot of the legislators. And it highlighted how we are sprawling development into the countryside, the many kinds of cost of that, and also the fact that at the same time we're abandoning our urban centers. These trends in our growth signal problems that we're facing today. And the sustainability of our farms and the landscapes and core communities are all being threatened by these patterns. And we've got to conserve our natural resources and restore our downtowns in order to alleviate the growth pressures into especially on the rural communities. Even when there's population loss in a region, such as had been in Lackawanna County for many years, this type of development, this sprawl and abandonment, is quite exaggerated, has been very exaggerated in this area and many areas. A lot of the cause for this has been state policies. So then, due to all of these factors, in the year 2000, the Pennsylvania legislature passed Act 67 and 68. And this made it much easier for municipalities to plan jointly, to join with their neighbors and create joint comprehensive plans. This is called multi-municipal planning. And in 2003, there was a report put out by the Brookings Institution. We call it the Brookings Report, but it's called Back to Prosperity, and it's all about Pennsylvania. And this book actually looked at so many of the economic costs, and not just the environmental costs, but the economic costs of that kind of growth pattern that we have so exaggeratedly in Pennsylvania, and made some definite recommendations for how that could be ameliorated. That book also discussed the loss of quality of life, the quality of life issues caused by a development pattern of sprawl and abandonment, and also got into the topic of brain drain, which is the problem of young professionals leaving the state, and got into some factors that bright young professionals want a good job market, but also want a very good place to live, vibrant urban centers, and access to natural areas. And when a municipality in Pennsylvania doesn't enter a multi-municipal plan, it must abide by the older law in Pennsylvania, which states that each and every municipality, whether it's urban or rural, has to provide for each and every, enough land for each and every type of land use. And this is one of the reasons that we've got this exaggerated pattern of development of sprawl and abandonment. It's evidenced by large shopping malls, industrial parks, etc., in previous rural areas competing with the cities and long-established boroughs. With multi-municipal planning, existing older urban areas can be designated as targeted growth areas with the goal of helping to regain population, commercial, and employment uses, while helping the rural areas to remain rural if that's their desire. And other areas can also be designated as growth areas. And we'll get into the growth area in the SAPA plan. We'll get into the growth areas in a few minutes. So in 2005, several small groupings of communities in the Abingtons had wanted to curb sprawl by working on such plans together. Then the leadership of those communities got together and started talking about what a more effective approach would be. And the people involved met with DCED, Department of Community and Economic Development. Cindy was there. And that is the agency that works with these community plans. That was in July of 2005. Then the Abington Council of Governments invited all of the communities, all of the municipalities in the county to an educational session in August of 2005 to see which municipalities would be interested in this type of planning. Also, I want to say that DCED was pleased to see that Scranton was interested in in that type of planning. They were represented at that meeting. To join such a group, participating municipalities must either be contiguous or in the same school district. And there's a good deal of work to the process, so municipalities have to be very willing to and express interest in doing this sort of work. Otherwise, they won't really participate in the planning process as needed. The result of those August 2005 meetings was that 9 of the Abingtons communities and Scranton wanted to join. And at that time, no other Valley community contiguous to Scranton expressed interest, except for Old Forge, and they were not contiguous, so weren't able to join. So the Scranton-Abingtons Planning Association was officially formed in January 2006, and then in April 2006, Dunmore joined. And you can see on this map all of the communities that joined: North Abington, Dalton, West Abington, Glenburn, Abington, Clark's Green, Clark Summit, South Abington, Newton, Scranton, and Dunmore. And one other thing I want to show, to help us through the process, we always used this book called Planning Beyond Boundaries, and it's a pretty thick tome, but it's a great book, I have to say. It's written by many of the leading planners in the state in conjunction with an organization called 10,000 Friends of Pennsylvania. And now I'd like to hand it over to Cindy to tell us from her perspective, from the state perspective and Northeastern Pennsylvania perspective, about multi-municipal planning.
Thank you. As Denise had mentioned, under the Ridge administration, the 21st Century Environmental Commission was formed. Since the inception of that commission, land use in Pennsylvania has taken off. We have a program called the Land Use Planning and Technical Assistance Program, better known as LUPTAP, in DCED, which provides funding for such programs. It's administered through the department and through the Center for Local Government Services. The center is also designated to provide an annual report on land use as per our Growing Smarter initiative. In Pennsylvania, in northeastern Pennsylvania, I cover 15 counties. I cover the Berks, Lehigh Valley area, all the northern tier, the Carbon School, Kilcombe Monroe, Pike Wayne, and the Lackawanna Luzerne areas. Currently ongoing, I have about 40 grantees working on planning. That includes 5 county-wide grantees, about 26 multi-municipal projects, which include about 80 municipalities, and about 9 singles. SAPA is one of the largest groups that I've worked with in northeastern Pennsylvania, second only to 112 group in Susquehanna County. However, SAPA is the largest group that I work with that includes a city, which is, as Denise had mentioned, very important as far as the land uses are concerned when it comes to implementing the plan. And the city of Lancaster and the city of Williamsport, although not in my region, also are large multi-municipal projects that involve counties and 11 or so municipalities. Some of the advantage of multi-municipal planning are priority consideration for funding for state grants. And this is identified in the Municipalities Planning Code, which is kind of the land use Bible in Pennsylvania, in section 10105 under legal effect. Municipalities that participate in multi-municipal planning efforts are given priority consideration on applications for funding for various programs from various departments within the Commonwealth in implementing their comprehensive plans. Excuse me. In addition to that, one of the major benefits of the multi-municipal plan is also that each municipality participating in the plan does not have to provide for every land use possible, they can spread those land uses out and put them in places where they make more sense. And I think Denise is going to talk about that a little bit later with regard to growth centers and employment centers and rural resources areas, et cetera. With regard to county plans, currently the Lackawanna-Luzerne County is doing a bi-county comprehensive plan, first bi-county one in the state. Counties are required by the Municipalities Planning Code to update their plans every 10 years. Municipalities are required to review them. County plans, as defined by the MPC, said the county comprehensive plan is a land use and growth management plan which establishes broad goals, the key word there being broad goals, and criteria for municipalities to use in preparation of their own multi-municipal plans and land use regulations. Municipal plans should be generally consistent with the county plan, but the county plans are very broad in their goals for the municipalities within that county. The county plays generally an advisory role in the preparation of a multi-municipal plan and implementation, and this is clearly defined in the Municipalities Planning Code, which also defines that the local ordinances supersede the county ordinances. And also, county plans should function as an integrating force in local municipal plans. The cost of developing county plans or multi-municipal plans in general can be quite expensive, and that's why we have the Land Use Planning and Technical Assistance Program, which gives 50% funding to municipalities that are doing these plans. But as evident through research done by Lycoming County, it is far more expensive for a municipality to do a plan on their own than it is to be involved in a multi-municipal plan. And so, like Lycoming County, as I said, in doing research, decided that the best way for their municipalities to move forward was to do various groups within the county in coordination with the county plan. So the land use planning program that we have is a very much a benefit to communities because, as I said, it provides 50% funding, and we work with counties to help with GIS to alleviate the local funding even further, where that's possible. And we work with DCNR and some other departments also in the implementation stages that can do other types of things with the plans that could help implement through open space plans or downtown reinvestment or revitalization plans. So the program has been extremely successful. It's taken a pretty big budget hit, unfortunately, in the recent past, but we're hoping that that'll change in years to come because the demand is still there. And we have seen much success based on the annual reports done by the Center for Local Government Services on land use that are required to be reported to the governor annually. There has been much success in Pennsylvania with regard to multi-municipal planning in helping to alleviate sprawl and to help promote proper development in Pennsylvania.
Cindy, can I also ask you to say something in regard to the legality of multi-municipal planning, what multi-municipal planning can legally do as compared to what a county plan can legally do? It's something that I think is...
Well, a comprehensive plan is not a legal document, it's a guide. But it does give you the tools to use to develop your zoning ordinances and subdivision land development ordinances in such a way that it allows for certain criteria to happen through multi-municipal planning, which in a county comprehensive plan, as I said before, it's a broad recommendation. It doesn't get into specifics. A county plan might recommend some general things for municipalities within their region, but they're not going to be specific. And a multi-municipal plan or a municipal plan that is done would supersede a county plan. And as long as they have to be consistent with a county plan, but it allows them to provide their communities with certain tools that the MPC allows, particularly under Article 11, which is the articles that Act 67 and 68, which provide multi-municipal planning, allows them to be able to legally share those uses and do designated growth areas and employment centers and transfer development rights. It gives them more ability to use the tools that are accessible to them through the MPC, where the county is just, it's more of a guide and just a broad,
So if not in a multi-municipal plan, each community would still have to provide each and every land use.
That's correct, yes, yes.
That's what I,
Yes.
Do you want me to talk about this?
sure.
We're talking a lot about communities working together. And by the way, I really personally want to thank DCED and Cindy for just supporting the group and being personally very helpful in explaining the niceties of planning to us all. Because, we on the local planning commissions are citizens. We're not professional planners by and large. Anyway, talking about working together across different communities, the question comes up, well, how closely are you working together? And we're all distinct communities, and we prize the fact that we are our own communities with our own local governments. So members of our Scranton-Abingtons Planning Association Committee wanted to include some language in the plan to make it clear that this isn't some kind of secret plot for consolidation or anything like that. And I'll just read the section in the forward to the plan that we put in. It says, while the benefits of multi-municipal planning are numerous, prudence dictates that all aspects of this plan need to be fully understood by all participants. Some of the more important aspects of this plan include: 1, this SAPA plan shall not infringe on any lawful rights granted to any member municipality that said member retained prior to its participation in this association. 2, all decisions relative to participating in this plan now and in the future are the sole dominion of the elected leadership of each member municipality. 3, each member community will continue to maintain its own zoning hearing board. 4, each member community reserves the right to withdraw from this SAPA plan at any time. And 5, the autonomy of each and every member community shall be permanently protected and maintained. So we just felt it would be useful to make that absolutely clear.
I might say one more
That's
thing. The planning code does allow for joint cooperative zoning when implementing a multi-municipal plan, but there are very few projects in the state that actually take advantage of that. Most comprehensive planning municipal groups that move to implementation do attain their autonomy. They have their own zoning ordinances, their own zoning hearing board, but the uses that are required for every municipality to provide are then spread out and put in places where they make more sense so that the region as a whole benefits. And the one thing we try to stress with multi-municipal planning is that it doesn't end at your borders. What affects one municipality affects the other. What affects 2 municipalities affects a region. A large business coming into one area benefits the region as a whole. So working together is very beneficial for municipalities, in a whole region in general. So they all benefit from it in some way.
Thanks, Cindy and Mary. I'm going to now say a few items about the beginning of the process and how our group started. In the last few months of 2005, after we had those summer meetings, the communities all went through a vote to opt in to the plan. Then our group immediately started applying for the grants. For the grants from, we had grant from PennDOT, grant from DCED, and also we applied and received some funding from the Willary Foundation and the Scranton Area Foundation. And we were, very grateful for all of those funds. Let's see. In 2006, the committee and the bylaws were also formed, and then the committee created a request for a proposal for a professional planning firm to help us with the work. And I should mention that regarding all these bylaws and everything, I should mention that in multi-municipal plans, it's really committee members for the important issues reach consensus. They don't actually vote on the really important stuff because everybody really has to be happy with what they're getting. So we can't have anybody being unhappy with with something, or they would leave the group, actually. So,
Excuse me, with
So-
that thought, I just want to, one thing came to mind when we're talking about them being one of the largest planning groups. Keeping it at a certain level is important for the sake of cooperation, and so that it develops a well. If too many municipalities, it gets too out of hand, and then it gets to be more like the county plan, where it would be too broad. And
Yeah.
to be able to get to do specifics and have a good plan that's a usable document that won't sit on a shelf because it's 4 inches or 5 inches thick, you know, and and people are afraid of it. You have to keep those at a minimum. So we felt that at this, when SAPA, when Scranton joined and then Dunmore joined, we felt that that was about the max that we could go at that point.
okay. The planning firm of McCormick Taylor, that was the firm that SAPA chose from the RFP process. The committee chose them in the fall of 2006, and they started working on the actual plan process with the group in January 2007. And a lot of meetings were held during those initial few months to find out the general direction of the group, and to also determine what the past development patterns had been, and even in the recent past, and what had been proposed for development. And in those months, seeing those development trends that were happening in the area, the planning firm did come up with this map, which they called the trend scenario. And this is a map that is the planning firm's estimate of what would likely be similar to what would happen if there would be no plan at all. And you can see that there's a lot of squares of development in the outer areas. They're mostly yellow for residential. There's some red ones for commercial and some for industrial, mostly in the outer areas, and very few in the inner urban areas, which is the trend that is seen so much across the state. And we use that map a lot at all the public meetings. In 2007, there were 2 early large-scale public meetings, and they had PowerPoint presentations. They were both in the Scranton High School to get early input from public and officials. The first was in June 2007, and then McCormick Taylor presented 5 different alternatives for where growth could be placed. And just like on this trend map, they took little chips and put them in various spots on the map to see which alternatives the group would like best. And we went through a lot of different alternatives. The group narrowed it down and tossed out development areas that the group didn't like. And from all of that information, McCormick Taylor was able to come up with the preliminary draft land use plan map, which is quite similar. It was quite similar to what we ended up with, which is, this is the more recent draft. Most communities did do some fine-tuning to that preliminary draft, and so to make sure that they got the shapes correct, et cetera. Also, while that was happening, the communities were working on an intergovernmental cooperation agreement, and that took many months. That took a long time, and Cindy helped a lot. That is a plan agreement, and it had to be adopted by ordinance by each of the communities, and this was voted on in July of 2008. So that was worked on at the same time. Then there was a fairly long process in which McCormick Taylor was writing the long form of the plan. And it went back and forth between our group making corrections, and that took a while. So we had another large-scale public meeting with a presentation in July 2009, and the entire plan draft was presented at that meeting. And this is a copy of the plan draft. It's I'm showing you with the appendices. It's a fairly good-sized document, but I think it's a pretty quick read, actually. And then the committee got from that meeting public comment, and also had a public hearing several months after that. And during those 2 meetings, gathered a lot of public comment. Then the committee met regarding that public comment. After it went out, the public comment went out to all the officials. The committee met and decided exactly how or if to incorporate those comments into the plan. And that's an important document in here. That is called the adjustments document, and it's about 7 pages long. That's very important, and that's on the SAPA website. www.sapaplan.com has both the plan and the adjustments to be made into the final plan. And using those 2 documents together, the communities began adopting the plan. Through November and December of 2009, 9 of the communities adopted the plan. So, and I should mention that through the process, each of the communities was able to create its own part of the plan. And this draft land use plan behind me is the centerpiece of the plan. I just want to say a few words about that. It is also posted on the website that I just mentioned, sapaplan.com, and if you go to plan in the menu and then plan mapping, you can get to that map. A comprehensive plan is intended to show a general view of what a community's public and officials would ideally like to see in their community in the future. And this is a comprehensive plan map. A comprehensive plan includes sections on general land use, general transportation, historic preservation, environmental protection, land preservation, housing, etc. A comprehensive plan map, this is the land use plan, has been described as a loose shirt. It fits quite well, but there's wiggle room. And I just want to compare it to the existing land use map. And you can see this has very rigidly defined areas that are square because it goes parcel by parcel, whereas the plan is more a little bit more like a loose shirt. It's a little more fluid. It's made up of rounded lines because it doesn't want to go exactly rigidly by each parcel. Also, the 2 maps are different. This is the existing land use, and this is the plan. The 2 maps are also different in that this has more detailed, many more categories of land uses, and this has broader categories.
Shall I jump in here?
Yeah.
Usually, a comprehensive plan's reach exceeds its grasp, It is understood that a community might not be able to achieve everything stated in its comprehensive plan, but the goal nonetheless is that it represent the community's ideals so that it can be used as a guide for decision-making. Comprehensive planning has two phases. The first phase is planning, the second is implementation. The SAPA committee hired the firm of McCormick Taylor to help with the planning phase. SAPA is now in the final part of the planning phase, which is adoption of the plan. And we are hoping that Scranton does reconsider so that it will remain part of this plan. The SAPA draft land use plan map, as Denise pointed out, is the centerpiece of the SAPA plan. In order to come up with the draft land use plan map, the planning team from McCormick Taylor listened to the SAPA community committee representatives from each municipality to get an idea of the continuing desires of each community, along with comments by officials and members of the public. To make the draft land use plan map, they also studied an existing land use map made from aerial photos and parcel usage information. This is the map that Denise indicated just behind me here. This shows current conditions on the ground rather than being, for example, a zoning map. The consultants also referred to maps of natural features such as steep slopes, hydrology, floodplains, farmland, protected land, etc. And these maps are all posted on the SAPA website, sapaplan.com. For reference, they're very detailed and very interesting information there. The SAPA plan looks 20 years into the future, so there are some features on the map that are not present now. Just one example is the green colored lines or roads which indicate pedestrian and bike-friendly routes. These were delineated because SAPA representatives said they wanted their communities to be more bike and pedestrian friendly in the future. Doesn't mean they necessarily are now. When future work is done on these designated roads and routes, the community may use the comprehensive plan and map to say that the road work improvement needs to include a sidewalk, bike path, etc. in order to achieve their goal. The planning firm of McCormick Taylor has stated that there's enough of each land use type indicated on the SAPA draft land use plan map, such as industrial, office, commercial land use, etc., to last this group for far more than 20 years. Even though this is a 20-year plan, it's got a 20-year look-forward period, all comprehensive plans should be reviewed after 10 years.
Okay, I'd like to talk about the growth areas on this plan. They're targeted growth areas, and I'll get up and Paul will help talk about these areas, and I'll point them out on the map. Since our region is fortunate to have urban and rural areas in close proximity, and since the urban areas have the desire to regain population, commercial and employment uses, most, but not all, of the SAPA plan's targeted growth areas are in the existing older urban areas. For purposes of this program, we're going to focus on the growth areas. And of course, there's a more detailed description of this in the plan itself, including the rural parts of the plan. But we'll focus on the description of the designated growth areas targeted for new or upgraded infrastructure and new development or redevelopment. So in the 10 communities, and I'm saying 10 because North Abington Township did not adopt the SAPA plan, so we're counting the 10 communities. They weren't a growth area anyway, but I just wanted to make that clear. So maybe Paul can read these things while I point them out on the map. Thanks, Paul.
Oh, you're welcome. Excuse me. The city center, which is magenta on the map, applies to downtown Scranton. The city center incorporates adaptive reuse of existing buildings and infill of new buildings into the existing block structure. The emphasis is on mixed-use activities with ground floor retail shops, restaurants, and services, and offices and/or residences above. The city center provides a high level of transit service. Pedestrian accessibility, safety, and amenities are emphasized through provisions for traffic calming, landscaping, lighting, and appropriate street furniture. Development and redevelopment occurs with sensitivity to historic resources. Civic squares, parks, and urban green space are part of the use mix. The city center extension, which is light pink, this is a mixed-use district. and it stretches to the north and northeast of the city center in Scranton. Parts of it are along the Lackawanna River. It includes, for example, parts of Ash Street, Sanderson Avenue, and the Laceworks area. It includes moderate to high-density residential development, retail, and office uses, often structured as ground floor retail shops, restaurants, and services with offices or residences above. This district also offers live work structures attractive to artisans for the co-location of residences and studios, and to other individuals and families as well. These areas include adaptability, reused buildings, and new infill structures, all completed with sensitivity towards historic resources and fitting with existing context. The mixed-use corridors, which is pink and gold stripe areas on the map.
Go slow on this. Sorry.
There are five mixed-use corridors in Scranton, including portions of North Main Avenue and Providence Road, South Main Avenue, Pittston Avenue, and Cedar Avenue, and a portion of Mulberry Street, and a mixed-use corridor along area which is along Route 6 and 11 in the Abingtons, both north and south of Clark Summit. These mixed-use corridors are linear activity concentrations and include a mix of moderate to high-density residential development with retail and office uses. These corridors are a designation for adjacent residential neighborhoods as well as for a broader area. Activities along these corridors are compatible with adjacent areas, although the corridor itself may be more intensely developed than neighborhoods alongside. Pedestrian access both to and from the surrounding area and along the corridors is a hallmark, as is public transportation along the corridor. The borough centers, which is pink areas, such as in Dunmore, are community focal points and hubs of mixed-use activity that support residential, retail, and office uses. Borough centers contain traditional building forms and uses and new and infill development compatible with the existing character of each community. Centers incorporate pedestrian amenities and accessibility to public transportation. Civic open space, pocket parks, and green links to adjacent areas are also present. Borough centers are focused areas within Dunmore, Dalton, Clark Summit, and to a smaller extent, Clark's Green. The village centers, which are orange areas, examples of village centers include the Red Barn Village area in Newton Township and Waverly in Abington Township. Village centers are relatively small to scale and include village-scale housing and limited non-residential uses focused primarily on services for people who live in the village and nearby. The employment centers, which are the red areas, examples of employment centers are found along the Kaiser Avenue corridor in Scranton and along interchanges with Interstate 81 in both Scranton and Dunmore. Employment centers are concentrations of commercial and industrial development, and some office with flex space to accommodate low-impact light industrial development, assembly, and high-technology ventures. These centers are highly accessible to the transportation network and include areas where low-intensity developments have been succeeded by higher-intensity structures of multiple stories that may include structured parking. These employment centers are on the plan map in the same locations that these uses exist now, except that there will be revitalization of the underutilized or vacant parts of them. The plan also allows for flexibility regarding where to put each use within those centers. The above are areas targeted by the SAPA draft plan for new and upgraded infrastructure and new development and redevelopment. Thus, on grant applications for improvements for these areas, the SAPA plan can be cited on the application to show that these areas are intended for new upgraded infrastructure and new development, redevelopment. Comprehensive plans, and especially multi-municipal plans such as SAPA, have become increasingly important in obtaining grants from most Pennsylvania agencies.
I'd I don't know if we should go into the rural areas. There's some tools that you can read about in the plan draft that are voluntary tools and effective tools for communities to remain rural, and they can be read about in the plan. But for purposes of this program, we'll more stick to the targeted growth areas. One thing I would like to mention is before we close, is there have been questions about cost, and the plan has been paid for by each community. Years ago, each community paid for their cost share of the plan, and plan adoption does not carry with it any obligation for future expenditures. The cost of implementation, I don't know, maybe Cindy, you want to say something about that in each community is going to really look into that and see what types of grants are available and work with that. And
Sure. Those communities that have adopted the plan and will move to implementation will work together to some degree, but each community has to look at their own ordinances and see how they currently comply with the comprehensive plans. Traditionally in Pennsylvania, up until the land use really took effect, communities tended to do a comprehensive plan and not update it or look at it or review it for 20, 30, 40 years, but continue to update their ordinances. So a lot of ordinances in the SAPA group, probably have been updated to the point where they may be in somewhat compliance with the comprehensive plan, but each community has to look at their own ordinances to see how they comply with the comprehensive plan. And that's very important because many lawsuits have been filed by developers because a comprehensive zoning ordinance is not in compliance with a comprehensive plan. So it is important to keep the two of them sort of in line. But each municipality will definitely look at their own ordinances, see how they want to update their ordinances to reflect what's recommended in the plan, and then will administer their own ordinances.
And in Scranton's case, the zoning ordinance would be the most essential part, and the city planner and some city council members have mentioned the possibility that perhaps all or some of the zoning work could be done in-house in Scranton. And I do want to mention that in hard copy, this plan is available at the Albright Memorial Library in the reference section, and there is one for circulation. It is also at the Abington Community Library in reference on top of the shelves. And in order to access it online, go to sapaplan.com, SAPA plan.com. And this document is the most important, and along with the adjustments document that I was talking about earlier. And if you want to look at the maps only, there's the special section for the maps. And again, we thank ECTV for inviting us to have the chance to get the information out about the plan to those who might not know about it. And also want to thank ECTV for their past filming of throughout the project, and for the public meeting that was held at the Scranton City High School. Those meetings that were held there. Do we want to give contact information, or do you want to talk about something else first?
Well, I have a couple of questions. By the way, thank you very much for everybody there. I really got an education at the ECTV studios here. My head is swimming. I have so much information, and quite honestly, it's kind of exciting. It really is. We're actually looking into the future. We're taking a peek. Somebody mentioned 10, 20 years down the road, and that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to pass it on, and I think that's what this plan is trying to do. But I have some questions that I jotted down as everybody was making their presentation. I think they're questions that our viewers can relate to as well. I know we talked about employment and quality of life issues and so forth, and abandonment. I heard somebody say abandonment is a problem. And is it true, and I can address this to anybody, by the way, is it true that abandonment has a cost to it?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought. I thought I knew the answer, but I
The
wasn't
lack
sure.
of tax base.
Exactly. Well, I mean, doesn't abandonment dwindle the tax base, not only of real estate and school taxes and so forth, but jobs get lost, blight sets in?
That's right.
And it affects the whole neighborhood. If there are vacant homes, everybody's property value is going to decline.
And the other thing too is municipalities like in Dunmore, we have an occupational privilege tax. If someone's not working there and they're gone, then we lose that
It
that
erodes
revenue.
that tax base, in other words. So I think abandonment or trying to stop abandonment sounds like it's pretty important.
Scranton and Dunmore were developed for, larger populations than they accommodate today. They still have the infrastructure, and they're still sort of set up to support that bigger tax base.
And when we talked about employment centers, that was brought up. And quite ironically, we're getting kind of bad news on employment overall, as we know, not just here. But here in our viewing area, it's pretty high. Extremely high. I think it's maybe the highest in the state from what I've read recently. But how do employment centers relate to our infrastructure of these municipalities in relation into our highway network for distribution and other things like that?
Well, taking Dunmore again, I don't mean, since I
Well,
represent
you're from Dunmore, so that's okay.
It's what you have Interstate 81 and 84 and 380, which run through Dunmore, and in our employment center off the O'Neill Highway, it's easily accessible to, anybody to get there, whether it's via truck coming in to ship, what have you. But it's right there along the interstate corridors. So obviously where we have in the Keystone Industrial Park and that surrounding area, it's adjacent to the highway. And it's very, like I said, it's very, very accessible for anyone to get there. So it relates. It's right there.
And I think that's what our viewers are starting to see, that everything, for every action, there's a reaction. I think we learned that in high school somewhere. But what's good for Dunmore is good for Scranton. What's good for Scranton is good for Clark Summit. What's good for Clark Summit is good for Dalton, and so forth. I think we're hearing that, and we need that. And we talk about a comprehensive plan. I'm not sure I heard this word, but it sounds like it's a flexible plan. And I think in any comprehensive plan, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm a layman, trust me. I just learned about this listening to the four of you, so you're good teachers, I think. Any plan to be successful has to be comprehensive. It just can't be a paragraph or two or a mission statement, per se.
And it's not just transport or just housing or
Correct.
just economic.
And it also has to be flexible.
Yes.
Because things change.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
When we talk about 20 years, who knows?
Well, if you look back 20 years ago, there's a lot of differences right now in our area, whether it's in Scranton or the Abingtons or Dunmore or whatever. It's different than it was 20 years ago. So this plan is looking into the future 20 years from now. And obviously in the year 2030, things are going to be quite different than they are today.
And also, I'm sorry, yes.
As you mentioned, a comprehensive plan is a guide. It's just like when you build a house, you have blueprints, or an architectural scheme. You don't build it with, just go and say, okay, what am I going to do, and then start building it. So the plan, but as you're designing your home, you make changes. So the same thing with the comprehensive plan. Over the course of maybe 2 or 3 years from now, maybe 1 or 2 communities or 3 communities want to look at the plan because something has impacted their municipality and they want to address it in their plan and maybe do an update. The plan can be updated at any point in time.
And a couple of last issues, because we have to wrap it up pretty soon. Historic preservation. I know there's a lot of viewers out there who are very interested in historic preservation, and we see, if you read the paper on Sundays, they always have, you know, an area in the past, and you see these gorgeous buildings that were gorgeous at one time that are now replaced by parking lots or office space and so forth. So how high of a priority, the question is historic preservation to the plan?
There's actually quite a bit about it in the book. I thought that McCormick Taylor did a great job on that and really recognized the wonderful the wonderful structures we have in this region. And they gave a lot of ideas for how to make historic preservation be part of the economic engine, because historic tourism is very big and can bring in a lot of money also.
And probably lastly, you know, quality of life. I think Mary mentioned quality of life. You know, the commercial says priceless, and I think the quality of life is something we really, when we talk about cost, and everybody's always concerned about cost, you almost can't put a price tag on quality of life. And the quality of life issues are kind of everything we've talked about in this plan. But I do have two final questions very quickly, if you would, and I wanted to write them down because I didn't want to forget them. What would happen if this plan were not done at all?
Everybody goes back to thinking in their little boxes, frankly, you know, and Dunmore doesn't look at what Scranton's doing, and Dalton doesn't look at what Glenbird's doing, and it's just much less effective. That's my little rant.
Okay. Well, that answers it.
What would happen also is that many of the uses that Scranton and Dunmore would want to have would have to be put in some of the other communities, like in employment centers especially, and much of the residential.
Okay, and my last question, in 1 minute or a minute and a half or less that we have left, is what do you see as the advantages of this plan for our community or for the region? Now, I said 1 minute or less, and I know it's going to be a long answer, but try to do the best you can.
If I may, I think and for all the communities, it's going to identify any future growth and development for each community, not only for Dunmore, not only for the Abingtons, but hopefully we get Scranton to jump on board. So I think that's the big advantage.
Very good. Anybody else before we wrap it up?
I think that, you know, the plan is an advantage to all the communities in that it does allow them to distribute the uses where they make sense the most, and that's a benefit.
Well, on behalf of ECTV and the entire region and the community in general, we would like to thank you for taking the time out of your busy days to come here to the studios in Scranton, by the way, and give us this information and give the information to our viewers that can help them all make informed decisions on what the future holds. So on behalf of the panel, on behalf of myself, Joe Gilroy, and ECTV, we'd like to thank you for tuning in, and we hope to see you again real soon.